My name is Tom, and I'm an AML and fraud consultant at MC2BIS, and I have with me Stephen Overton, Director of Financial Solutions from Zencos Consulting, who will present with me today. So on the agenda for today, we will give you a short presentation of our companies, a high-level overview of the key points of attention of the 4th EU Directive, followed by a positioning of the AML discovery and reporting QuickStart solution that we co-developed with our partner Zencos. The AML discovery and reporting QuickStart solution, from now on referred to as AML QuickStart solution, will be the key part of this webinar with a live demo whereby we will show you 2 sets of AML QuickStart reports in a live overview of the solution. During the presentation, do not hesitate to ask questions. If time permits, we will answer them during the Q&A session. Otherwise, the answers will be sent out to you in a follow-up email. There will also be a series of polls through the software demonstrations. Each poll will last approximately 20 seconds. Results of the polls will be reviewed at the end of the webinar and provided in a follow-up email to all attendees. So, hereby a few words about MC2BIS. We are a specialized consultancy company in the area of AML compliance and fraud detection. This based on the domain expertise of 20 consultants, gained over more than 18 years of experience, and in excess of 120 important AML implementations performed during that period of time. Some of our experts are currently involved in some of the largest programs around in large financial institutions, in particular institutions putting in place fast remediation programs following multi-million fines imposed by the regulators. We have offices in Europe, Brussels, Luxembourg, Bratislava, and even a satellite office in Budapest, and we're planning to expand our local footprint in more countries across Europe. MC2BIS is closely aligned with SAS Institute, for whom we resell SAS Now cloud solutions, perform consultancy activities, and project integration. Stephen, could you introduce Zencos, our partner in the US, who are running a similar business model as MC2BIS?
Yes, Thomas, thanks for having me. Zencos is a consulting firm located here in the U.S. We're the solution partner for the AML QuickStart solution with MC2BIS. Zencos has been a partner of SAS Institute now for over 14 years. We've implemented AML solutions at over 20 different locations. The AML QuickStart reporting solution we're going to show you today is a product of many years of AML reporting requirements designed with real banks here in the U.S.
Thanks, Stephen. So the benefit of the Zencos MC2BIS partnership lies in sharing top-level knowledge and experience of both sides of the pond. And it is clear that in matters related to AML regulatory compliance, US regulators are setting the tone. New requirements in the US are blowing over fairly rapidly to other parts of the world, impacting at first larger institutions, but affecting every single financial institution as local regulators emulate the US requirements. We plan a series of 10 webinars to be held every 6 weeks on the relevant topics of concern to the AML compliance community. The first webinar will focus on the 4th EU Directive and how it impacts your institutions and organizations. So what are the topics addressed by the 4th EU Directive? So the first impact concerns the obligation to check for domestic PEPs. A further obligation, until now little noticed in general comments around the 4th EU Directive, concerns model risk management. This is the European version of the US OCC 2011-12, obliging institutions to demonstrate how detection models have been calibrated and how their accuracy is being monitored over time in the light of constantly changing behavior of money launderers. Next is the inclusion of AML compliance in the operational risk, leading to the obligation to perform data-driven risk assessments. A good example in this respect is the guidance issued by the Dutch National Bank named Systemic Integrity Risks Related to AML and Counter-Terrorist Financing and Sanctions. Special attention is now also required for all foreign branches and subsidiaries, which will fall under the EU regulations. Fines and sanctions are being increased, and financial institutions will have to respond quickly to queries from the financial intelligence units. A good example being the request to list Russian and Ukrainian nationals, which could potentially be listed on news sections or embargo lists. So let us start off with the first poll. You have approximately 20 seconds.
Have you recent experience, or do you expect increases in future years? I mean, it's not this year. This year.
Okay, so the focus today will be on how the Zencos and MC2BIS AML QuickStart solution can help you in 1, mapping and visualizing risk, in 2, discovering undesired behavior not necessarily picked up by the monitoring systems by drilling down into the reports provided by us, and 3, measuring the impact of changing thresholds and how to build fast and accurate reports quickly without involving IT. All this both for internal parties like risk officers or management, or external parties. These are key features which will enable your organization to demonstrate to the regulators how detection systems have been calibrated, how new risks can be detected, and how quickly you can respond to questions from those regulators. So let us now move to the software demo. So when you see here, when I will open the scenario, I open them in a viewer window here, and this will enable me to see all the pre-configured reports running on top of my latest data. Our data will come essentially from the existing AML system of the bank itself. It could be a system purchased from an outside vendor or an internal built system. Now, as everybody knows, it is possible that banks have both in parallel. For this demo, my data will be customer and account information, transactions and risk factors like PEP flags, high risk flags, and clients having been flagged for suspicious behavior. When we look at the various reports, we can see in the upper tab here that we have 12 different scenarios. These are pre-configured reports, but of course they can be adapted to your particular needs. So let us go over the first section with the goal just to give you an idea on how the system works. So in the opening screen, the gorges here that you see here provide us with the amount of alerts generated per risk score. So for example, when I look at the months July and the month September, we can see that there are almost no alerts in July, but that in September, if we look at it, there's plenty of them. So you see here. So these are pre-configured reports. So for particular reasons, I will focus on 4 scenarios first out of many. So let us go to the first scenario. So in this scenario, the aim is to monitor closely the activity of new customers. So when looking at the scenario, we see a pie chart and a bar chart on top. This will help me to see how many new customers I have. Underneath, we have a cross tab showing the transactions in detail per customers. In the cross tab, the credited amount will become red once the threshold has been triggered. For the debited amount that passed the threshold, the figures will become yellow. You see that here. So when looking at the scenario in the upper right bar chart, we can see the amount of new customers that we had in the last 2 quarters. So you can see that here. If you want, I can even click on it to enlarge it. So, and in the bottom part, we see in the cross tab that once the amount of the transaction becomes red, this means they've been triggered by the threshold imposed by the bank. So when the threshold has been triggered, the system will send out alerts to the person in charge of suspicious activity.
So Thomas, can we change those thresholds?
Yes, of course we can change the thresholds. So this enables me to look at which customers are trying just to stay just underneath. I'll show you here. So if I move this threshold here, and I'll just put, let's say, sorry, just change this quickly. You can straight away see here that everything that was not in red before becomes red. So we can straight away see that all the transactions that we didn't notice before, that we can have a look at them. So let us go to the next scenario. So in this scenario, we have a geolocalization map that shows us the geographical location of the customers of the bank. Below the map, we have a cross tab that shows us all the transactions. And at the top, we have a drop-down list that you see here that will enable you to filter all the transactions. The aim of this scenario is to monitor the activity of the customer showing high-risk country characteristics, such as country of residence, nationality, second nationality, and even country of birth. You can see with drop-down lists, we can easily select them. So this scenario will also allow us to monitor all the transactions that go to a specific beneficiary country or come from a specific country of the counterparty. So we can combine several filters to analyze a specific transaction that wouldn't get noticed otherwise. I'll show you an example. So for example, I would like to monitor all the transactions that come from clients that live in Belgium. So I just choose Belgian residents, but who have a Ukrainian nationality. So I just click on this here. I straight away see, once I filter these contacts, I can have a look at where they live exactly. And I can also see all the transactions of the clients or the clients with a Ukrainian nationality. So you can see here, you can see all the transactions that's underneath in the cross tab.
So Thomas, can you filter those transactions that go or come from a certain country of the counterparty?
Yes, of course. So let me first clear the filters. So for example, I would like to monitor all the transactions from English residents and that have transactions to or from Russia. So I can see here, I select that. Immediately I have a view of where my clients live and their transactions with high-risk countries, enabling us to analyze and monitor these transactions. Here we can notice that both clients are probably acting in concert because they are both making the same transfers to Russia. You can see that here. We have Mr. Landmark and Mr. Timberland. So let us now move to the next scenario. So this scenario shows you a heat map to show you the correlation between real monthly income and the amount and type of transactions done by the customers. So in the scenario, we monitor the global activity of the customer. It will focus mainly on the deviation of the usual transactional pattern. Here, the threshold is a combination of a threshold and a percentage of increasing activity. So on the one hand, we have the size of the rectangles that you see here, that represent the real monthly income of the bank's customer. And on the other hand, we have the color of the rectangle that represent the absolute amount of all transactions done by the customer. You see that here. So the darker the color of the rectangle, the larger the amount of transactions. So when looking at Matthias Verbeke and Luc Leijsen, because of the red color, I can detect that they have way too many transactions in comparison with their real monthly income. So now I can filter the transactions by type of drop-down list. So for instance, ATM transactions, cash transactions, or even wire transactions. You can see that here. This enables me to have a look at who is doing unusual amount of transactions of a certain transaction type compared to his real monthly income. So here, for example, I'll select all the transactions done by ATM. So I can immediately see that this changes here and that Janssens Jan does an unusual amount of ATM transactions compared to his real monthly income. So in the last scenario that I will show you here, I'm presenting the aim to monitor closely the activity done by specific customers belonging to high-risk industries. So we can filter with the drop-down list transactions that come from a certain industry or that go to a certain industry. So best practice recommends that we exclude monitoring these customers with classic AML scenarios and analyze them separately. So in this section, we take a look at all the transactions that have happened over a certain period of time for customers working in a particular industry. An extra feature quite useful is the filter on all transactions done by customer in a specific type of high-risk industry. So let me show you this by example. I would like to have a look at all the transactions done by customers working in real estate. And I can just go here, look at all the transactions. And just by clicking on the drop-down list and selecting the industry I would like to investigate, I immediately create a view on all the transactions done by customers working in real estate.
So Thomas, can we also filter the transactions that come from or go to a certain industry of the counterparty?
Yes, of course. You can see here that I could filter transactions from people working in real estate and that come from or that go to a certain activity or industry. So here, for example, I want to see all the transactions from the people working in real estate that go to crowdfunding. I immediately see that Pyramid Kebab has several transactions to crowdfunding. This could be suspicious, especially when looking at the amounts that he has transferred. So you can see that the amounts are quite big here. So let us now move to our next poll. So let me just end before passing you on to Stephen with this final conclusion. This solution makes you compliant with the key requirements of the 4th EU directive and at the same time protects the integrity and reputation of your financial institution. So let me just pass you on to Stephen now if you want to.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Thomas. So we're about to walk through a series of reports that follow the AML BSA process. We're going to start with scenarios, look at alerts, move to case investigations, and finally end up on a SAR analysis or suspicious activity report analysis. Along the way, we're going to look at an example pre-built ad hoc exploratory report, which will allow us to slice and dice transactions to help aid in investigation, maybe look for different typologies, or look at different trends for a specific customer. These reports are delivered as a part of a QuickStart approach, so we're not limited by these single reports. These are meant to serve as a starting point to get things rolling quickly. Some of our goals here are to provide the tools and services to quickly deliver a set of predefined reports so we can reduce the time to market, we can reduce the average startup time for SaaS visual analytics, and ultimately we can reduce our startup costs. So in our first report, we're going to take a look at scenario efficacy. As you can see here, we've got a line graph on the left, we have a cross tab in the upper right, and we've got a detail listing on the lower right. The context here, though, is that I'm an AML manager. So let's pretend we're a compliance manager, and we just want awareness and visibility of how effective and our scenarios are. So we can dig into the most effective and least effective scenarios, look at some of the specific alerts expired for those scenarios, and then maybe export for further analysis. So we can see here on the left, I'm looking at an efficacy rate. So you may wonder, what is efficacy? What we define that as the number of productive alerts divided by the volume of overall alerts. The inverse of that just may be the false positive rate, but we're going to focus on how productive are the alerts that come out of each scenario. So each line represents a category for our scenario. So whether we're looking at cache activity, ATM or phone activity, ACH, loan activity, sort of our common typologies there. What we can do here is we can highlight or brush some of our more effective scenarios, and we can see our objects here on the right will update. So from here, if I wanted to see what are my 16 alerts, of course these are manually created alerts, so maybe they're going to be more productive, but I can click and see my 16 alerts and get the details below. So the key value here is that we can monitor and show how effective our scenarios are at detecting potential suspicious activity.
Stephen, what is the typical efficacy rate you want to see?
So typically in the US, we see about a 10% efficacy rate or about a 90% false positive.
And can you select a specific scenario category and filter?
Yeah, so what I'm going to do here is actually flip between some of our sections. So in the same report, we've got what are called sections. So I've got a specific section here in this report that only looks at a single scenario. And I got this from working with a customer one time where they said to me, Steve, I just want to understand for a given scenario, I need some way I can print this out and show my regulator how effective, for example, ACH or my structuring scenarios are. So within this specific report, I can select a time period, and I can use the drop-down to select one of my scenarios. And now I've got this to some of the SAS AML out-of-box scenarios, so I'll just select one of these. I think this is our structuring scenario. The bar chart updates. So the blue bars represent the volume of alerts that fired from the scenario, while the green line represents how effective the investigate or the triage process was in for the specific scenario. From here, going along with my example, again, pretending I'm a manager, and I want to print this out, what I'm going to do here is quickly just select what I want to print. Give it 2 seconds here just to kind of complete our example. This is an example of how we can print these reports, and it basically prints to a PDF, and we can hand that out to our regulators or any other managers if we'd like to. Give us 2 seconds here, it should come up. So we can see the same reports we were looking at, and the page that we care about from a regulatory perspective may be our individual scenario report that shows how effective we were, some of the details behind it, and that's kind of that key example there. So now we're going to have a poll. So the poll question is, how effective are your current AML scenarios? Okay, thanks everybody for voting on that poll. We'll take a look at the results a little bit later. The next report we're going to look at is an alert analysis. So again, I'm a manager, I'm a compliance manager. I want to understand what do the alerts look like coming out of these scenarios I'm firing. So in this particular report, we're looking at a bar chart on the left. So the blue bar represents our volume of alerts. Green bar represents our false positive count. I'm looking at my alert volume by year. The tree map on the right breaks down the different categories of these alerts. And again, the table listing on the bottom right gives us the details of these alerts. The nice thing we can do here is we can get very interactive. So I can select a given year, and our objects on the right will update. This is the standard thing I like to do where I can provide different slices of a report. So a lot of people may want to look at reports by year, but what we can do here is we can drill down into the year itself and go down to month. So what I can do here is see the same metrics but by month. And again, I can select a given month, and I can see here the cache activity is my highest volume of alerts. So I can select cache activity, and again, I can see an update here of some of the detailed alerts behind that. I have another section here again that allows me to look at alert volume by investigator, which is the same kind of context, but we want to focus a little bit more on the investigator. And what we can do again is we can select a given year. My bar charts will update, so I can see that 2015, the volume of alerts, the number of alerts worked by investigator. We're probably a large bank here. We've got about 15 or 20 different investigators. Again, I can drill into the months, and actually I think we can drill down to the day. Yep, we can actually go onto the daily level. But I'm actually going to keep it back to the monthly level and just stick with it from here. So the value here is that, again, I'm a compliance manager, and I just simply want to visualize the volume of alerts that are being fired by the different categories of scenarios, as well as look at things by investigator.
Stephen, as a manager, how would I use this report?
So again, we're a manager this whole time. If I was a manager, what I would do is use this report for maybe looking at some of the alert triage process, or try to get an idea of any bottlenecks, or if somebody's working too many alerts or not enough alerts to help improve the efficiencies of our alert triage process.
And can you tell me what types of alerts they are working on the most?
It's a good question. So on the right here, again, I can look at a given time period by selecting it. And on the right, I've got my investigator. So I can see that there's two people on the bottom that are working about half the volume of alerts as everybody else. So if I click the bar for the investigator, on the left here, I see the types and the categories of the alerts they are triaging. And you may wonder, and this is good for a manager because it gives them the visibility of, okay, they may be working less alerts, but maybe they're working the more complicated alerts, or some of the typologies are a little bit more complex. So that's the value with that. So the next part we're going to move to is we're going to go to looking at case lifecycle. So again, we've gone from scenarios that do our transaction monitoring to looking at the alerts that come out of our transaction monitoring. Now we're going to take a look at our investigations as a part of that BSA process. In this report, it's very similar. We've got bar charts, a tree map, a couple different ways to look at cases that we've seen with the customers here in the U.S. Again, in the upper left is our way to slice and dice the time portion of our cases. So you can see here that for 2015, I can select a given year, and all the other objects will update in the report. Or what I can do is drill down into 2015 and look at the volume of cases by month. And I can actually select, if I want to select multiple months, if I wanted to say, give me fourth quarter of last year, I can highlight those months. And then in the lower left, I see a life cycle distribution. So this is a very common thing I see with our customers here in the U.S., where people just want to see the volume of cases into different buckets of time, so an aging distribution. So I can see here the number of cases we had that were 1 to 10 days to complete, or 11 to 20, or 20 to 30. Obviously, we probably care more about the cases that took a little bit longer, so I can actually select those, and you'll see on the lower right, we get a pie chart of who worked those cases. From here, I can actually double-click an individual investigator and get the details behind the cases that they worked. So again, a lot of interactivity, a lot of ability here as a compliance manager to get an overall sense of the cases that we're working. Oh, and by the way, we have a tree map as well that shows the different types of cases as well, so whether they're SAR 90s, basically different things like bribery, tax fraud, structuring, your common AML groupings there. And again, the value here, the key value is that we can look at things at an aggregate point of view, visualize our investigations by category, and then also understand how long it's taking on average for us to complete those investigations.
So, Stephen, what if I wanted to change those ranges in the distribution graph, for example, let's say 5-day ranges?
That's a good question. So you're talking about the chart in the lower left. So in the lower left, a common question I get is that maybe the customers want to go from, like you said, a 5-day range. I've had very odd ranges where it's like maybe 1 to 5, 5 to 15, 15 to 30. In those instances, it's very simple to change. We use something called a SAS format. It's very easy to adjust and just change on the fly. That's a part of the implementation, is we just have a conversation and ask the customer, how do you want to divide your aging distributions? So shifting to another report here, we're going to still focus on investigations. The next report is our open case aging. So the report we just looked at were for investigations in a broader sense, so cases that are closed overall over time. In this report, this is a more operational or more of a daily type of report. So this is something where what we're looking at here, these are open cases. And on the left-hand side, we've got another distribution graph that shows the volume of cases into different age ranges. So I can look at open cases that are 1 to 10 days old, 11 to 20, 20 to 30. So if I'm a manager, again, the context here is I'm an AML manager, I want to focus on cases that are old and see who's working those and hopefully take some corrective action from there. So very interactive. Again, I can select a bar, and on the right, my visualizations update. So I can go down to see that individual investigators, I can click their names here in the middle, and I get some of the detail behind it. And the key value here, again, as a manager, is that we can potentially spot some of our older cases that are not progressing fast enough, identify who's working that case, and then take appropriate action from here. I can export the report or send it off to somebody.
Yeah, what would I do with this data?
Yeah, and that's a good question, Thomas. So if I was a manager, I kind of hinted at that. What I would do is, again, I can use some of the print features if I wanted to print this out or export it or even email it. I can send it to a supervisor, maybe take some corrective action using some of the data we have here in the report. So to recap again where we've been, we've looked at scenarios, we've looked at alerts that came from the scenarios, we've looked at cases as a part of the investigation of those alerts. Now we're going to shift to what we call our Transaction Explorer. So this is a different context in the sense that this is a tool that's meant for more of an ad hoc exploratory investigation. So I could use this at any point in my process if I'm doing an investigation on a customer and I just want to type in their number here in the upper left, I can do it then. If I have some request from anybody, if my manager says, hey, we need to kind of look more into this customer, this is where this report is useful. It is really at any point in time. It could be an investigator or a supervisor, really anyone in the compliance space could use this report. And the focus here is on an individual customer. So I type the customer number in the upper right. I've got a date range if I want to focus on a specific set of time. I'm going to leave it where it's at. In the upper left, where you get some of the details about the party, like their party number, the number of counts they've got, the aggregate dollars, or the aggregate transaction amounts over the time period we have here selected, their average transaction amount, the volume of transactions. And the whole focus here is obviously the customer, but what I can do here is we've added different drop downs and filter capabilities. So if I want to analyze different typologies of this customer, so for example, I can look at what are my debits. I can say, and again, everything's very interactive, so I can see a line graph over time that helps me visualize a couple spikes in some of their activities for debit transactions. From there, I may want to select my primary medium to be anything around cash equivalents. And from there, the whole point here is to get down to the low-level detail so I can use a couple of filters to slice and dice transactions in more of an ad hoc sense and use the filters here on the left to focus on different aspects or typologies or transaction types that they are doing. And again, I can filter, I can set different ranges. So if I wanted to focus on transactions greater than $3,000, I can, actually this customer has nothing, so that's fine. But if I wanted to, I can adjust the dollar amount of the transactions. So we're going to shift to a poll, and we're going to have this poll around the nature of transactions. So the poll is basically, how many transactions do you process for current AML scenarios? Thanks everybody for voting here on that poll. So we're going to shift to one more report. I'm going to move to our SAR analysis. SAR being suspicious activity report. So the context here is I'm back as a manager, and I just want to visualize where my SARs are being filed on a map. And this is again in the U.S., but this could be in Europe. The nice feature here is I can see on the map where are my SARs being filed for. So for example, I can drill into Florida and see, again, the circles represent, the size of the circle represents the volume of the SARs, while the color, the more reddish color, represents the higher suspicious activity amounts filed on those SARs. Again, in the upper right, I can adjust my time period if I needed to. I can see a breakout here of the different suspicious activities selected for that given SAR. I can drill down into specific locations, and again, everything's interactive. So if I want to focus on Miami and see that looks like suspicious use of multiple accounts is a higher frequency of SARs being filed in the area. From there, I can actually double-click the bar chart and drill down into the specific detail if I wanted to. That's a very common thing we like to apply to the reports we provide as a part of our QuickStart, is that we have the aggregate view of what we're focusing on and slicing it up a few different ways. But I hope you'll notice that a common trend here is that we always provide a way to get down to that lowest level detail so you can export this or go research from here further if you needed to. So the value of this really is really around the awareness of your suspicious activities that are being filed over time. This allows you to visualize the volume of fraud types being filed, and also visualize this using a spatial analysis here using our geography map. So we're going to have one more poll here, and then we're actually going to have time we will have time to review the results of the polls here on the webinar. So our last poll is, how many SARs do you file yearly? Okay, so that's the end of our software demonstration. Thomas, do you want to take it from here?
Thank you, Stephen. So, of course, we perform all of this in a secured environment with a strict access right, and we make sure that all actions leave an audit trail and a timestamp. So this will help us in demonstrating to the regulators the timely undertaking of new analysis and discovery of risk, so that the financial institution complies with the model risk requirements. So in summary, what I have showed you is what we have showed you, sorry, is how the QuickStart reporting solution can help you by providing a user-friendly and flexible environment to perform data exploration. This will give you a full oversight and control of your AML compliance. Internal reports will also be generated on a periodic or ad hoc basis in no time, and where you can map your risk and demonstrate how you respond to changing behavior of money launderers. So now, if we want, we can go on to the answers of the poll questions.
Thanks, Thomas. So we'll show the results of the polls here. So, Thomas, can you see the poll?
No, unfortunately not.
Sure. Okay. So for poll number 1, it looks like, so the question was, have you recently experienced or do you expect increased regulatory scrutiny? It looks like the majority of folks on this webinar, about 37%, said that they expect some increased regulatory scrutiny this year alone. From there, it looks like about 20% of the attendees had it in the past 2 years. and it looks like 17% in the last 3 months and 17% in the last year as well. It looks like 10% of the people on the webinar in the next year expect some regulatory scrutiny.
Okay.
So for poll number 2, get here. So Thomas, we're going to bring up the polls here in a second. Let's shift to our Q&A session here. We've got a couple questions that we can go through based on what we gathered in the webinar.
Okay, so I had a couple of questions here from clients. One of the first questions was, can we switch our elements in the reports?
Yes, so you definitely can. This is a part of the actual implementation. So the elements can be adjusted in the reports we've seen that we've shown here in this webinar. All the elements can be adjusted based on the availability of data flowing into the reporting environment. So in other words, we can add fields or remove fields, but they have to exist in our data model. So if you wanted to break a bar chart down by category, we can certainly put that in there. But again, we have to assume that for example, the scenario category exists and is available in the data coming in. That's the main thing, is it revolves around data availability. But again, we keep our scope limited, but there's probably 100 different ways to slice up alerts or scenarios.
Okay, another question I had here is, how often is data refreshed?
So typically, we'll refresh data on a nightly batch process. So information is gathered overnight, pushed into this reporting environment, and then the reports the next day are updated essentially with data up to the previous day.
And an interesting question here is, how much data can you load?
It is a very interesting question because that goes back to the data. So typically what we always recommend is a sizing exercise. That's more of a technical discussion, but the purpose of it is to provide specifics around what's the hardware we need, and that is really, in my experience, revolves around the volume of transactions and alerts, because those are really the highest volumes from a data perspective, as well as the number of attributes that we typically will analyze. So we'll look at a sizing of that, and really that's the big focal point. But as far as specifics now, we can't get into that because every customer is very different. But that's what we would have. That's one of the first conversations we would have in a follow-up conversation after this webinar, is really understanding the profile of the specific client.
Okay, I've got a last question here. So what if we want to get into more statistical analysis?
It's a good question. It's a common question too, is with SAS Visual Analytics, there's a lot of other tools we haven't shown in this webinar, but they allow you to really slice and dice as more of a power analyst, as SAS calls it, the SAS data exploration. So again, assuming our data model can support the analysis, we have a lot of different tools we can show it as a follow-up discussion that allows us to do things such as forecasting or looking at clustering, or a common thing we look at too is customer segmentation or customer profiling, and we use those exploratory tools to look at different things and use visualizations such as decision trees or different clustering models.
Okay, thank you. Now, are there any other questions? I have a look.
Okay, so Thomas, we can go back to the polls here. Can everybody see? Okay, good. So for poll number 2, the question was, why do you experience the need for better AML reporting? Looks like 41% of us said to map risk. 19% said to discover new AML modi operandi. It looks like 16% of you guys said for internal purposes, and then about a quarter of us on the webinar said that to report back to regulators. So we'll move to poll 3. Poll 3, how effective are your current AML scenarios? Looks like 61% of you guys said you didn't know. So that's definitely room for improvement. Looks like 26% of the people on the call have greater than 10% effective. 10% of you guys said that your scenarios are 5 to 10% effective. 3% between 1 and 3%, and actually nobody has between 3 to 5%. But that's I think it's very interesting to see that a lot of folks just simply don't know. So we can certainly hopefully help you guys out with that. Poll number 4. Question was, how many transactions do you process monthly for current AML scenarios? Looks like the vast majority, 81%, said less than 1 million transactions on a monthly basis. 10% said between 1 million and 5 million. 5% said between 5 million and 20 million, and it looks like another 5% have greater than 100 million transactions on a monthly basis. So again, very interesting to see the profile of customers on this call. Our last poll was, how many SARS do you file, or suspicious activity reports do you file yearly? Looks like 90%, the majority of people on the call, file 0 to 50 SARS on a yearly basis. From there, it looks like 5%, 100 to 500, and another 5%, 500 to 1,000. Now, it's very interesting because here in the U.S., we have large institutions that on a monthly basis can file hundreds of suspicious activity reports in a single month. So it's very interesting from the U.S.'s perspective to see the difference in Europe. Okay, so we've got another series of questions that we've gathered from the webinar. First question is, can we use this solution to send reports back to regulators when they raise specific questions? That's a good question. That's a very good question, actually, because one of the examples I showed was a specific example. I worked with a large bank here in the U.S. where they wanted, this was the scenario efficacy reporting. So that is a good example. With SAS Visual Analytics, any of these reports we've shown, you can print the PDF. So then that PDF can be sent back to your regulators if you want to answer those specific questions. Got another question here. How many transactions and customers can this solution support? I kind of answered that a little bit ago, but essentially that goes back to a sizing exercise. Typically, I think the data we looked at on my report, we had about, I don't know, I want to guess 10 million to 20 million transactions, but again, we have a demo environment. This all goes back to the sizing exercise. So theoretically, we can support whatever you needed to because SAS Visual Analytics is built for high performance, so we can scale depending on the needs and the size of the customer. We have another question here. Does this solution keep audit logs for traceability? It surely does. Everything behind the SAS platform keeps, there are logs everywhere that records login events, when you open the report, when you save reports, and there's actually some audit reports that come out of box now in SAS Visual Analytics that give you some of that visibility. Another question is, can we use this solution to report our AML risks? Assuming we know what your risks are and we kind of know the area you want to look at, for sure. We can definitely look at if your risks are, and really here in the U.S. at least, it's a lot of feedback we get from the business. So it's, if you think you have a lot of risk around wire transactions coming out of Iran or any high-risk jurisdiction, we can certainly focus and tailor reports and enable you to tailor your own reports to focus on any specific risks you like. Another question here we have from the audience is, can this solution coexist with 2 or 3 different AML systems? That's a good question. That goes back to the data management side of this. So as a follow-up conversation, that's really a second conversation to have, is the data model and the technical specifications behind this. But essentially, we would take one or many AML systems and stage the data in a standardized format using a data dictionary and some technical specifications we can provide. So theoretically, we can support 1, 2, 3, or as many AML source systems as you have. Another question here is how quickly can such a solution be deployed? For small, it goes back to the size of the customer, and typically it ranges anywhere from 2 to 8 weeks. 2 weeks being I think for very, very small institutions, but then 6 to 8 weeks for the larger banks and institutions. Just going through our questions here. I would like to do look-back analysis. Is this possible with your solution? I assume maybe that's around the transaction analysis side, or maybe looking at different look-back periods for some transaction events or different activities for the customer. If you notice in a lot of our reports, I try to always focus on an aspect of time in a lot of our reports and provide filters so that if you wanted to customize your look-back period or your time frame of whatever you're analyzing, that we can make that available. So those are all the questions. Actually, we've gotten through all the questions. We've shared all of our poll results. Thomas, I'll hand it back to you to close us up. But those are all the questions we've got.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephen. So I would like to thank all of you for your attention. Our next